But I was very interested in the topic that he was presenting, even though I wasn't really sure why what Liu Ming was teaching was relevant yet. I started studying Polestar right away, although my interest was more in healthcare at that time. It's still in healthcare, of course. But I didn't understand why astrology matters to healthcare, both as a practitioner. A lot of people in the audience today are practitioners, but also as a patient. It took me 2 times through of studying Polestar with Ming in his classes, and then many more years of doing case studies and tracking back with him to talk about how to integrate the information into a chart properly. You know, because when we're working in the realm of healthcare, ultimately the question is, you know, if we're gonna diagnose someone, we have to be able to recognize not only illness, but we have to be able to recognize health. And if we're going to recognize health, then we have to understand what we are, who we are, what are we, who are we. This is what Chinese Polestar astrology is talking about. I think you guys get this because you're here. You know, the fact that there was so much interest in this chat demonstrates that people are interested in something larger, a larger way of looking at the world, a larger way of understanding that of compensating for the lack of cultural core that we have, the limitations that we experience, the tightness of a logical mechanistic approach, especially when we're pushed to the brink by current events. You know, the logical mechanistic approach alone doesn't help entirely with the course correction that we sometimes need. Whereas if we have an awareness of as a global population, of the mythopoetic inclusion in the larger scope of time, then we can feel a little bit more oriented. It doesn't mean that a pragmatic understanding of what's happening in the here and now isn't relevant. Chinese wisdom is both secular and spiritual. There's room for both. So, you know, these days, a lot of my clients are bumping up against a lot of questions about the limitations of our societal structure, against the frustrations around the dream of contemporary cultural values, which are kind of breaking down to some degree in the face of climate change and pandemic, et cetera. It just feels really ruthless to a lot of folks out there. And when we have a larger context, we can feel ourselves as part of a larger wave. And when we can feel ourselves as part of a larger waveform, there's more freedom. There's more freedom, there's more relaxation, there's more love. We can see the truth of this pragmatic and spiritual approach to life in our experience. We can see the place for all of this when we look honestly at the truth of our experience. But the sages wrote it down and they taught it to us. They did this they gave us this system. Well, it's a combination of systems really. But you know, this information that we're talking about tonight is a good, I mean, it was written in texts about 3,000 years ago, in some of the first texts. And even then, it was something that we had access to, that was talked about as though it was very, very old. So this is information that's 8,000 to 10,000 years old. And we're still talking about it today because it's good. It's good information and it works. So the subject matter is, what are we? When are we? When are we? That's why Chinese astrology is relevant for us. That's why there's so many people trying to get a seat at the table to tonight's conversation. So the first part of that, to answer that question before we look at this year, is to understand that we're a function of qi, a function of time, riding an individual wave within a larger ancestral wave, which occurs together with others in time. So like today is, for instance, an Earth Snake Day and a Water Tiger year. And, you know, you are whatever year you are. I see a couple people, I see a wood dragon in there, and I see an earth goat out there. I recognize a couple names in the audience, and a couple of you changed your tags. And we just entered a rooster hour, and we just finished a monkey hour. So maybe some of you like rooster hour better, and maybe some of you don't like it as much. So in other words, the terrain keeps changing. It keeps changing. Every 2 hours, we're experiencing our own little weather system is bumping up against a larger weather system, which is within a larger weather system, which is in a larger weather system of chi. So that's really what we are. And I think that antique Chinese thought would say that that's kind of the end of the story. There's nothing more concrete really underneath that. We're just continuing to move and change and rotate, and work our own individual fate tangle or shape or so, or field against the larger field. Sometimes it feels like a tangle, right? That's the subject of looking at the individual charts. But it need not really be a tangle. We can learn how to contextualize and orient ourselves within the larger annual chi. So this is the Yin Water Rabbit Year. First, we're concluding the Water Tiger Year. We're still in that tail end of the Water Tiger Year. By contrast, this past year has been more confrontational, more aggressive. I'm sure some of you probably felt it was a little rough, late spring, early summer. No, kind of get like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Maybe evened out in the autumn for a lot of folks. Now more intensely tigery. That's not necessarily good or bad. Tiger's just really big, right? So you may be feeling your edge right now, but not an outright crisis. Whether it's a quote unquote good year or a bad year, of course, depends on a more complex calculation, but it's useful to know what's in that field. So this has been a bold year, big movements. The chi pulsed in and out. It went from nearly unmanageable and enormous to being more chill, this back and forth pulsation that wasn't necessarily predictable or resist prediction. So rabbit nature is steadier. It's steadier because the borders of a rabbit identity are naturally more fuzzed out. Okay, rabbits feel themselves as part of a larger dimension of interbeing with others. They, when we talk about rabbit, we're talking about one of the 12 flavors of chi. All of the, we use the word rabbit just to kind of as a thumbnail to remember what the main qualities are. We're not really talking about rabbits, obviously. But rabbits are in touch with the subconscious. They're really dropped down deep into a sense of like subconscious harmonization with the group around them, whatever that group may be. And in a water tiger year, it's going to be an enormous group. It's going to resist the normal definitions that a rabbit usually has around who are my people. This year, it's kind of blown open and we're really feeling ourselves part of something enormous. So let's talk just generally about rabbit nature. Rabbits are caring, they're polite, supportive, they're modest and humble. They're in touch with the experience of the wider group. And this is because this is the defense mechanism that the rabbit has. They don't have the teeth of the tiger, and they don't have the capacity to leap up into the air like the dragon. They don't have the ability to disappear underground like the snake. They protect themselves by staying out of danger in the first place. And the way that they stay out of danger in the first place is to prevent that danger to themselves and hopefully to their group via communication. So because they're so safety oriented, since they're like cute little fuzzy cuddly creatures, they want a group, they might have a clique because they want to be insulated from harm. They want to know who their people are, they want to know who's with them. If they only really, if they have a dark side, it's if they're tired or need a rest or an acupuncture treatment or a meditation retreat. They can be divisive within a group or gossipy or manipulative. They can go all the way to backstabbing, but that's a misguided rabbit. That's not a normal rabbit. Healthy rabbit perspective is we are all going through stuff together. And that's why rabbits are considered to be the intuitive animal. It's not like herd mentality. It's not we're all going through the same thing together. That's more goat, right? It's not the same thing happening for everyone. They're just present to the fact that we're all going through stuff together. Everything's going through their stuff. And they're going through their stuff. So they can really meet, rabbit chi really meets others with that feeling of heart and presence. And since we're all going to be in a rabbit year, that'll be available to all of us, no matter what our individual animal is. Our own capacity to connect with the wider group is more available. We'll all be able to connect the fact that we're going through stuff with compassion for the fact that others are also going through stuff in a way that we don't normally maybe have access to, some animals, right? Rabbits are going to be relieved because they've just all been through tiger year. And so we can all kind of fuzz out all of our edges. We can all kind of like zoom out and, let our vision go a little blurry and just sort of see everything as all sort of a dance of sort of interplay of color. Things won't be so distinct. Things in this year won't be so clear and young and regimented and organized, and this is good and that is bad. It'll be easier to let go and disidentify with those preferences, hopefully, because we recognize that everyone has preferences. If we have a preference, it's okay because it's in context of everyone having preferences. You see what I mean? So it's about contacting the experience of the wider group. It's a little harder for the animals who like leadership. It's not that leadership roles aren't functional. It's just that the leadership roles in a rabbit year aren't as functional if they're disconnected to the wider circle. So dragons and tigers and, oxen pressing forward are invited to. It's not so hard for tigers because they already have that black stripe, right? The orange stripe of charisma and the black stripe of rest and going inward. But those other strong animals, those more young animals, are gonna are gonna want to drop down and check with the group more and make sure that that leadership in this year is speaking for everyone's experience, or speaking to everyone's experience rather. Authenticity in a rabbit year means that we all have to drop down and into our own experience and check, like really check, am I doing my own inner work? How can I connect that with this group, with this wider group? So it's a bit of a break from the erratic nature of tiger that we've been through, and before that it was ox year, which just plowed forward with whatever was going on. So authenticity for us this year is, again, to just drop down and into our own experience. It's an important year for self-reflection. In rabbit year, we're living on the subconscious plane, the plane of intuition. Intuition means that we're really connected. That's why we can feel each other. So subconscious material is rabbit, and that's a place of connection. This is different from snake. Snake is like even deeper, all the way down into the deep unconscious, which is a place of also connection if they go really, really down and through, but is also a place of dissolution, of deep unconscious, of sleep, of deep yin. So this is going to have this, since the water rabbit year, there is that deep yin flavor, but it's still a rabbit year. So it still has this relevance to being human, snakes want to go beyond being human. They're like, why is everyone, talking about, the latest episode of whatever that, snakes just can't really understand it, but rabbits can get down and talk about the latest episode of whatever that was just released and connect it to something more mythic, larger, more informative, more spiritual, really. So, rabbits will get in there and they'll have a petty conversation where it looks like a petty conversation, but it's really dropped down a more a more spiritual content can sort of arise in this environment. So one way to align ourselves with this rabbit chi is to allow ourselves to function on instinct. Loosen up yang, loosen up regimented schedules, let yourself vibe and feel into things. But also investigate those instincts after you see them arise. Use that sort of instinctive arising as an opportunity to go ahead and consider why that's habitual for you. Peacemaking activities are another good way to harmonize with rabbit chi. It's about community building, about feeling into the group. This is not going to be a year that's fruitful for warlike aggression. Those who try to wrangle power like that are going to come off as tacky, and it's just going to feel so out of touch. If we can look at our global leaders, right? When I think through the global leaders, none of them are rabbits. So they're going to have to tune in. They're going to really have to tune in but they will know. We'll all feel in this year that it's a time for compromise. It behooves the stronger animal to try modesty, consider other perspectives. Rabbits are not usually clamoring for first position, but rabbits will be very, very effective this year from a secondary position, like the assistant, the assistant's the one who gets it done, that kind of thing. The rabbits will really thrive in that kind of situation. Let's see, what are some other ways that we can coordinate with rabbit chi is generosity. And why generosity? It's not just like, be good, it's be generous as a reflection, as a practice on our own interbeing. It's important to be generous with everyone and be understanding, and even try being anonymously generous. Watch out for performative behaviors. So like watch out the person who has a big nonprofit presence, or who's doing a bunch of philanthropic efforts, but can't be basically sympathetic and understanding to their friends, or loses their temper with their kid. That kind of thing is like, not the kind of generosity that we're talking about, although keep up with the good nonprofits and philanthropy, of course. So we need to all work on expressing our generosity, but it needs to be connected to that inner work, right? Not just it's not going to be like a rooster-like display, that's very antithetical to this year. And why does anonymity work so well in a rabbit year? Because in a rabbit year, especially a water rabbit year, water is so vast, we can feel that we barely exist. We're just barely here. In the grand scheme of time, the grand scale of time, the grand scale of togetherness, who are any of us really? And this is how we want to practice generosity. We're asking ourselves the question, how far in and down into our own experience, how far in and down into our own mind do we have to go to discover that your own experience overlaps with or connects with all others, with all other minds, with all other people? This is the place from which we want to practice generosity. Because it's been such a rough couple of years that people need reassurance, and we can reassure people as a practice. Rabbits need that. Rabbits are so security driven. So reassure people consciously, de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. That's basically rabbit year activism. Any of our activism is going to be about de-escalation. We can do that on a personal level, in our home space, with our friends, with our family. And hopefully we're going to see it on a larger, grander political scale. Rabbit wants security. We all want security. So overpowering one another to try to force a correction that we think is going to create security for others doesn't work. Now, after Tiger and Ox, we can all see this in this atmosphere now. It's time for us to feel that. So reassurance goes a long way to create security for self, because we create security for the other, right? So don't go nuclear, you know? If you're upset, if you're having a hard time with someone and there's a temptation to really lose your temper or unleash on someone, don't do it. Don't go nuclear, because people are, in Rabbit Year, we can sense this better. People are naturally generous, and people are generous to those who are generous to them. So it's normal to well wish others. And if you don't well wish others, then it's a good year to look at that. Yeah. Competition, that sort of thing. Nobody wins. Rabbit knows this. The only rabbits who want to hurt and manipulate others are the imbalanced ones, and they just need self-care. Lend resources and watch resources come back to you. Basically stay human, people. And this works on the large scale too. It's a good year to notice who's been othered in our society and try to see yourself as somehow in a circle with those. Bring those people in. This is not a political comment. This is an astrological one, because Rabbit Year is very different from Wood Water Rabbit Year is very different from Metal Rabbit Year or Wood Rabbit Year. So Water Rabbit Year, we want to widen the circle. Rabbits can be kind of like cliquey, like Mean Girls kind of thing when it's not going well. And we do have a couple of little bit of challenging moons that we have to get through in this year. And so, you know, if we as a world can avoid that sort of cliquey divisiveness, then it'll be a really good setup to keep things very harmonious. They're you know, rabbits are generally good, and the native element of rabbit is wood. So this is a Water Rabbit Year. So water on wood. This should be, you know, this shouldn't be a dangerous year, but it is big. So for this year, we want to think big, but instead of thinking, it's feeling. And instead of big, it's deep. Okay, so feel deep is the new think big. All right. Water element represents this kind of inconceivable enormity. It's ancestral in scope. It's mythic in scope. So this is the year, if you've never done this before, especially, this is the, and you'll need this. You'll need this for Tiger Year. I mean, not Tiger Year, Dragon Year, which is next after this. Okay. This is the year to see yourself, to begin to see yourself on the mythopoetic level. Natural time movements are always large. Natural time movements are slower than the human mind typically works. We're busy people. So for busy people who are running around, it's time to find that slower waveform. And it's not just about saying no to activities. It's about reframing how we are and connecting to something much, much bigger. As we do that, we'll be able to feel that slower, deeper pace. Yeah, down the rabbit hole. Self-reflection, right? How am I really? That's the question. To help us drop down into that larger scale. Connecting deeper. Rabbit knows what this is. When we slow down, we can start to see what's behind the gerbil wheel. This is really in stark contrast to the human realm, which can be so speedy and talky. And so sit with, like, what's the speed of the mountain? What's the speed of the vast ocean? You know, sit down for a minute and think about, like, ask yourself, like, what is geologic time? These are the kinds of things that are going to get us closer to Water Rabbit. What is geologic time, and what does it have to do with the march of humankind? Because we are in community, right? It's just a really, really big, a big part of the wheel that we're looking at. Acupuncture is good for this if you have a hard time slowing down and feeling this deeper, more connected way of relating to larger time frames, because the channels are multidimensional and they put you into contact with it, and then you can work on stabilizing it with your own practices or with more acupuncture. And side note, acupuncture, they say it's good for health. So yeah, Rabbit style, we can drop down into that. This is a good year for internal practices, for seated practice, for ancestral work, for big scope community hive mind. It might not be the best year for implementing major community shifts. Those things will be implemented more in the dragon year next, but we're gonna decide what those will be this year. This is the year to participate, to decide together. And if you don't feel like you're together with part of the if you don't feel like you're that you're together with the group, you can find that this year more easily than in the past couple. So for some context to kind of give you an idea of like how this went down last time, the last Water Rabbit year was 1963. And in tech, we saw some interesting things that'll help illustrate my point, right? So in tech, we had the introduction of the push button telephone. How rabbity is that? I mean, everybody like getting together on the phone and talking, and you know, miniature TVs were a thing, especially in Japan. So you could be hearing about and seeing what was happening in other places without being there. That is so rabbity. In culture, zip codes were introduced. There was Beatlemania. Domestically, so like, zip codes. I really think about how, we were recognizing how large our culture was, and we were trying to figure out how to organize it, right? And the same thing was happening in politics. So that same year, 1963, 200,000 people marched in Washington, D.C., and Dr. Martin Luther King famously delivered his "I Had a Dream" speech. Dorothy Bell sat down at a lunch counter in Alabama and wasn't served. So much marching in Birmingham, Alabama, so much movement with civil rights. The Kennedy assassination happened that year. These people are they're famous because of the way that they moved enormous groups, right? Martin Luther King, Kennedy, right? And Kennedy's assassination had a majorly unifying effect on our cultural identity for a while, which always changes, things change, right? Globally, the Global Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed, which was a pretty big thing. That was good. So see, like treaties, peacemaking, lots of that sort of thing happens in rabbit years. The Vietnam War suffered a major turning point, characterized by pessimism. It was the first time everyone started really questioning the war. There were a lot of there's a lot of peace activism, very Bob Dylan, Joan Baez kind of thing. In Vietnam, Buddhists were protesting. You've all seen that photo of that Buddhist monk who died in self-immolation in the streets by fire. That happened in a water rabbit year. So famous water rabbits, we have Albert Einstein. How down and in is that? Pope Benedict, who just died, Michael Jordan, Whitney Houston, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, George Michael, Coolio, Seal, Quentin Tarantino. I don't know if that gives you much of a flavor. Rabbits like to network. So and in our world, we can see some things like that. Like we've got Chat GPT. Have you guys heard about Chat GPT? The changes that have been made in AI, where you can literally go on to a website and ask a question and have a back and forth conversation. It's not like just Googling things. It will actually answer you. That's very rabbity. Character AI, which is an AI that allows you to like actually talk to humans, made up humans. Like last night I played with this technology. I just heard about it for the first time, and I had a conversation with Lao Tzu. Should try it. So we're seeing these kinds of like I realize we're still in a tiger year and these things were released, but we're going to see them used, and we're going to be getting used to them in this rabbit year, and we're going to have more of that kind of thing. So think about impact on the whole world in terms of business, in terms of technology. Things that are considering the impact on the whole world will do well. We all need to get good at compromising. Working at work will be back because people will want to be together and communicate. I think that Five Branches and many of the schools are going back to in-person classes. So environments where people work together will be good. I also think that working from home will also be here to stay. And hidden roles will have more power, you know, people who, you know, we won't necessarily know where the major ideas are coming from. Fame is going to be kind of interesting. I think that's why the list of famous rabbits feels so weird and hit or miss. You can't really get a lot from it because rabbits are typically not functioning out in front, you know. Let's see. I know I'm bumping up against the time when we should open up to questions. Let's see, the other things I want to say. Well, we can talk a little bit about the geopolitical situation. Again, peacemaking. And I think is going to be, you know, useful this year, or at least a temporary sensation of outright fighting. You know, Ukraine's Zelensky is a fire snake and Putin's a water dragon. So that's interesting to think about. I think that a snake knows what to do with a rabbit year a little bit better than a dragon does. Harder for dragons. So we'll have to watch that unfold. Brazil, everything is hitting the wall with Brazil right now. Lula is a wood rooster, and he's got this, like, therefore he has this smart, ever fresh feeling. But Brazil itself is an earth ox, so it can kind of, like, you know, Brazil just continues to plod forward no matter what's happening. Bolsonaro is a wood goat, so he knows how to move the people. They both, you know, who knows? They're both wood signs in an earth ox nation. So that's interesting. Things are continuing to fall apart here in America. We're a fire monkey country led by a water horse right now. And I don't know if you've noticed, King Charles is an earth rat, so you know he's got no idea how to connect with the people. So of course this is all sort of, you know, I'm joking a bit about these because of course you need to be able to look at people's actual charts, and I have looked at these figures' actual charts, so it's a much bigger story. And back at home, relationships, provide security to one another, communicate. This isn't a good year for ruthlessly cutting people out and deciding who's, you know, solving problems with swift top-down kind of actions. This is good for me, this is not good for me. It's more like it's a year to exercise understanding and get good at communicating and get good at compromising and get good at demonstrating affection and you know, discover your partner's love language, discover your family member's love language, reassure one another. It goes a long way. Don't go nuclear. Yeah. So before I go on to the 12 animals, or maybe I should go on to the 12 animals before I take questions.
Yeah, I would say go on with the 12 animals, because
Sure.
I think people might have those questions, although I might be the only one, but I'll be bold and assume there may be one or two. You had also mentioned some challenging moons.
Oh, yep.
Say anything more quickly about that?
Sure. Well, you know, the late winter, early spring looks nice and harmonious, especially the first 2 to 3 lunations. Late spring gets a little more troublesome, especially April, May. So the remedy for that, again, exercise generosity, contribute to a field of merit as a practice of interbeing. Yeah, caring for others to ensure that you'll be cared for, that sort of thing. And it works the other way too. So if you haven't felt cared for, then you can look at your conduct, right? Summer, it really depends on what happens during that April, May time. be the generosity you wish to see in the world, but not for credit. And do it as a practice to feel the bigness of it all. The transitions between the seasons can be a little bit tricky, all of them. Autumn resist prediction. Winter should be okay. Yeah, the part that really pops out to me is the late April, May, early June part. Yeah. Does that answer your question? It's astrology is never, we shouldn't use astrology to game our lives, right? And of course it's so transit dependent. Everyone's got different progressions. And in many ways that's more important than oh, I'm a snake. What is rabbit year for me? Oh, I'm those are useful, and we can go over those a little bit, although I also noticed that different traditions have a different take on that. So I'm always sort of listening as an astrologer to what the 12 animals are saying happens for them, because there are different lineages that say different things. Basically, it's a harder year for the rats, the dragons, the monkey. Some people say it's good for monkey. Most people say it's hard for monkey. Rooster is like kind of good, bad. It has an oppositional energy. So roosters like intellect. They like to choose the best among the many. The rabbits don't want to. The rabbits have their preferences, but they want to experience. But they're able to experience and respect the many. Roosters need to make a choice, so it's a little bit antithetical chi for the rooster. Monkey likes to try on identities. It's not deep by nature. It discovers itself by what it is not. Whereas rabbit goes deep. Rabbit goes deep, opens wide, and really respects animals who have the capacity to meet them there on that wider, more open plane. So monkeys are a little bit like, what? They might not really know how. Dogs do okay. Dogs love a good committed group. Pigs are having a great year. Rabbits are sexy years. Pigs are always up for a party. I'm doing this all crazy order. Let's go back to the beginning. Rats, they just have a hard time relating to the chi. They're not normally having an intuitive experience. They see how all the different segments add up to a greater whole. So they're sort of present to a greater whole, but they're not concerned with it in their daily life. So rats are a little bit confused about that. Oxen, they don't really notice. They're very strong. They kind of plod along so they can plod through this. Tigers are also wood element natives like rabbits. So there's some compatibility. I think it's hard for the tigers not to be aggressive, but they can relate to the need to chill. If tigers are aggressive, then it's not gonna land. And so they might, get a little depressed and spend a little more time in the black stripe, which, go get some extra acupuncture, do some extra meditation. So rabbits, it's usually considered to be great for the, provisionally great for the people in their native year. So it's a big year for rabbit. It can feel like a lot for rabbits. Rabbits don't really like it to be a lot. Rabbits like it to be a little bit more manageable, but it's a lot in a way that matches them. The chi environment perfectly matches who the rabbits are. So it'll just feel really big. Rabbits can prioritize rest and they'll probably be fine. They'll be happy that everyone else is like a little bit more intuitive and thinking about them too, for a change. Dragons have a hard time, except for the fact that dragons never have a hard time because they're so darn strong. It's hard for dragons to put down that internal need to forge their leadership position and promote that. So they need to learn how to listen and cooperate. Cooperation is important for the dragon this year. Snake, whatever. Snakes are always in their own world anyway. Horses, they're sort of impervious to it. They like the herd kind of flavor, but horses do have more of a tendency to be independent. So they'll have to work a little extra to get aligned. Goats do great in this year. They're like, great, everyone, you know, goats love a good group. They're herd animal. They have a different way of approaching group material than the rabbit does, but it should work just fine for them. I think that's all of them. I think I started with monkey and rooster. Yeah. So that's all of them.
All right, do we want to open up for questions? So
Yeah,
if any of
sounds
you
good.
have, if you have a question for Dr. Ann, so I have you guys in a strip on the top. If you can, use the raise hand function. If not, if you can't figure that out, just raise your hand and I'll try to scroll through as well. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Ann? And if you don't want to ask it yourself, you can also throw it in the chat box and I can ask it for you. What? I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, so Lindsay asks, I would love to hear more about America being a fire monkey country and how this year would affect the US. After Ann answers that, we will go to Umani, unless they put their hand down. Did you put your hand down? Okay. So we'll go Umani's question after Lindsay's question.
Okay, so fire monkey. Well, I'm gonna grab my little thing that shows me what all the different leaders are. Yeah, well, you know, monkey. You know, the US fire monkey plus water horse leader in Joe Biden. You know, Biden loves to work. He just loves to you know, nose to the grindstone on the things that are happening in this country. And the country just can't resist being all over the place. There's not, you know, America doesn't have the kind of core that makes it easy for it to do well in a rabbit year. You know, I mean, I think it might help me if I knew exactly what your question about the US is. I mean, there are certainly aspects within the US that are going to do very well. You know, the ones that are functioning in a way to meet with the larger needs of the larger group, you know, like businesses. I mean, you know, America is like basically a group of corporations now. And it's so highly factionalized here that you know, it actually it could be a year where, I mean, for all of us, it's going to be a year of pulling back and fuzzing out. So there is a chance that the US can do that. The fire monkeys, at least they don't have an identity that's so entrenched that they can't drop it to try on what else is happening. So that could be helpful for the United States. But yeah, fire country in a water year. I mean, not a lot of easy traction for the United States to rise in glory and on the world stage. You know, this isn't a time for that. No country should be rising in glory on the world stage. No country should. We should all be finding a sense of wider community that's not defined by geopolitical boundaries or borders, you know. And so for those of us who are inside the United States, and I know that a lot of people, I'm seeing that a lot of people, I'm counting like at least 8 different states on the when I look at the pages of the participants here that I know. I don't know if anyone from abroad is on here today, but it's a good time for the United States to not think of the world's happenings as a stage for the American drama. It's a much bigger world. And if we can see ourselves as, you know, if we can even start to recognize politics as not just American politics, but look at global politics, stop putting ourselves in the center. This is a year where that's going to happen anyway. So that's why I say it's hard for the US. But for those of us who are ready for that, we'll be like, yay, it's time, you know? Like nothing about this year needs to be scary. The benefit of Chinese Polestar astrology is that we can get on board with the bigger cycle. So the bigger cycle is open up. US can do that.
I think that was good. Well done. Hi, Imani says she's gonna skip, so we will go to Andrea's question. And let me scroll up to so Andrea is asking, what if we are a water sign and your year is the rabbit? Does that change the kind of year you will have? So maybe you're a water rabbit.
Well, if you were born in a water year, this person's asking? Yeah. Well, so that can make it more harmonious because you were already born in a water year. However, the caveat is that different animals have a different does that person want to share what their animal is, and I can tell them I can share with them what their native element is.
Andrea, do you want to turn your mic on, or do you want me to say it, or are you like, no?
Sure. I may be mixing up 2 different forms of astrology too. So if that's mixing it up, I'm 87. So if I don't know if that's actually the water year. I was thinking water element, but I may be mixing up 2 different forms. So if that's it, you can
Well, what animal are you?
Rabbit. But
okay.
I'm a water sign, but I didn't know if that was, I know you were talking a lot about water for this year. So I actually don't know if water pertains to my specific Chinese zodiac.
Not in that year. The last time we had a water rabbit year was 63.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then of course we always have to remember when we're calculating, I know you're all probably sitting there. If you haven't already, you're Googling your your animal. But be sure to check for when the Lunar New Year occurred, because this year it's happening January 22nd. Sometimes it happens as late as mid-February, you know? So sometimes people will be born in January and they'll think that they're whatever the bulk of the year was, but they're not. They're what we think of as the previous year. This is how the lunar calendar works, 13 moons, right? So yes, but yes, of course, the year that you're born in. So the babies that are born this year will be little water rabbits, and the other water rabbits will be turning 60 this year, and that's it. And one set is the Yin Water Rabbit, and the other set is the Yang Water Rabbit, meaning that we have 120 different types of people, right? Because 12 chi expressions multiplied by 5 elements multiplied by 2 Yin and Yang. What Chinese astrology is saying is there are 120 characters on the game board, and then of course each one of us has a chart you can look at, which shows a star placement, which is going to tell us more about the ancestral rhythms that we're each working with, and where fate is, where free will is, because we have both fate and free will. It's not like a one or the other kind of thing. But yes, so it just sort of depends on what your native element is and what element you were born in, as to whether it feels more relaxed and smooth, and whether it feels more anxiety provoking for you.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean we're all kind of working with that in a way. And because rabbit's native element is wood, that means we need to watch our livers a little bit. Rabbit is also associated with large intestine, right? So that's what we're thinking about in terms of health. And so seasonally, we're really going to be thinking about the fruition of the year will come in the winter. You know, whatever's coming up for us individually in our chart. So you may not know your specific individual chart right now, right? That's okay. What all of us, the fruition of the year will occur with the water season, so winter, because it's a water rabbit year. Yeah. Can always meet up and figure out the specifics for anyone who's interested separately outside of this meeting, if anyone wants.
Excellent. I'm trying to take notes while prepping the next one. So I'm sorry, guys, if I'm a little behind. I always end up with like 10 pages of notes. Ming Dragon asks, can you, so Ming Dragon, I actually thought that was your name for a minute. Then I realized I changed it. So Ming Dragon is asking, can you please speak a little more about how this rabbit year will be for the rabbits themselves?
Oh, like awesome time to just go ahead and be yourself. Let your rabbity freak flag fly. Don't have to like hide it. Don't have to like hide in the burrow. It's been a treacherous couple of years. Tiger is notoriously a difficult year for rabbits, which we're wrapping up right now. So rabbits can really feel free to just sort of let themselves become the expansive, immersive beings that they already are. I like rabbits. I like them a lot. Yeah, and also, I said before, it's a big year for rabbits because the whole world is reflecting rabbitness back to these rabbits. But when it gets really big, that's a time to double down on your rabbitness. You don't have to pretend to be a tiger anymore, right? You don't have to pretend to get on board with something other than your native chi. You can just be more rabbity in response to how big it is.
Excellent. All right, so Karen, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Karen, maybe Corinne. I think it's Corinne. Corinne is joining us from Germany. Welcome. She was born in the year of 1963, so they'll be able to tell us a lot. And they are also a fertility practitioner, Chinese medicine practitioner in Germany. And they're wondering if this could mean, I think it's in relation to the rabbit, could this mean a rising rate of fertility, pregnancies, or healthy live births?
Great question. Yeah, everybody's going to want to get busy this year. Yes, more pregnancy. You're asking about more live births. I can't turn off the doctor part of me that knows that there's more complications, being reported due to COVID. COVID's impact on pregnancy is quite challenging. I think it's raised the rate of stillbirth to 1%, which is quite high. And we all already know, those of us who are healthcare practitioners know that miscarriages are already quite common. Water year, rabbit year, yes. Like everybody wants to have fun and bring more babies in, and all those rabbits are awesome people. They're all awesome, beautiful peacemakers for the world. So we're happy to have them. The water element aspect of it, I would not necessarily say is negative because water engenders wood. However, we always have to remember that the water element indication of the deep ancestors is there. And so babies born at this time, or even babies carried but not born, are still participating. They're still participating in this wider immersive chi expression. Ancestors who need to come back, but maybe do not need full expression of a life, are participating, are playing. So we can welcome these ancestors, regardless of whether they come all the way in or not. And so I think this can be of great comfort to our patients, you know, who are pregnant, and those who, you know, who may experience loss in this year. But it's not a negative indication, no. It's just deeply, deeply connected. In fact, Water Rabbit Year offers an opportunity for the resolution, for that kind of resolution quality of the deep ancestors. Good year for ancestor work, regardless of whether you're doing it by having babies or not. Yeah. And then of course, it's always case by case. So if there's someone who's having specific fertility issues, that's when you want to look at the chart and check whether it's an easier or more difficult year. Look at the partner's chart. Those kinds of things are definitely important to factor in. Yeah. How's that for an answer? And also congratulations on making it to 60, because you know, that's considered in some Chinese traditions to be kind of like turning 18. Because it, like, you know, by turning 60, that means that you've seen one each of all different 5 kinds of the 12 animal expressions. You're just missing the full set of yin and yang, but you got half of them. So when you get to 120, you know. So thank you. We all, you know, we need those people who have the larger view of 60 plus years. Yeah.
The next question that's come up, because we're open for questions again, is Tamara is asking, what is can participants email you? What is the best way to get a hold of you? Popping into your website would be good too. So what is a connection space for you for them? Yeah,
definitely connect. The website would probably be the easiest. It's ritualhealth.com, ritual, RITUAL, ritualhealth.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram and blah, blah, blah. My email is ann@ritualhealth.com. Feel free to reach out, of course. Yeah. I joked at the beginning of our chat that, you know, I'm only doing this because Dr. Bob made me, but it's true. Because it's because I recognize the relevance of this for clinic, that I even started. You know, I was when I studied astrology, it was never with any intention to actually practice as an astrologer. But my mentor, Dr. Bob, was like, you can't hold out on people like this, because I was seeing its utility for understanding when what looks like symptoms is really just a manifestation of time. What looks like symptoms is really just you know, oops, I neglected to, you know, pay attention to my career, or oops, I neglected to pay attention to my property or my family, wherever the big stars are, right? So when we know where that is, we can kind of learn a lot about prognosis and get a better clue about how to work and how to see if it's a chronic condition or an easily resolvable, wrap it up real quick and easy kind of thing. So.
All right, any final questions? Someone, so hold on, let me get back to this. Okay, one comment says, one of my mentors said to look out for more water disease in the water year. And Lindsay has a question. She says, as a medical doctor, what do you see in your practice that reflects the patterns of what you have learned in Chinese astrology? And did the Taoist traditions utilize Chinese astrology for health issues?
Yes. So when we look at a chart, there's a couple different things we look at. We might look directly at the health palace in a chart. So, you know, when we look at a chart, we're looking at 3 different things. We're looking at character, and that's what we're talking about right now. The stems and branches, the animal and the element information, that's just the stems and branches. But there's this whole other larger part of the calculation, which tells us about where the stars are located in the chart. And that tells us about where we have fate, and where we don't have stars tells us where we have free will, where we can do whatever we want. Because remember, this is a Chinese system. It's not a fatalistic system where we're, you know, damned if we don't do something, or damned if we do something. We have the freedom to just sort of live our lives, do whatever we want, because large time is going to take care of it. Whatever we decide to do, large time is going to harmonize us if we have a hard time harmonizing with large time ourselves. So when we look at health from a clinical perspective, we're looking at, or as a patient, we're looking at the health palace to see what is happening there. We're looking at progressions. And we're also, and that kind of gives us an idea about longevity, about whether mental health or physical health avenues are going to be more useful for treating medical conditions. Some people have a chart to do super standard medicine. You know, wherever you're from, that's going to dictate, or whatever your culture is, may have a heavy hand in dictating what is seen as conventional, right? So like in the area where I live, I think acupuncture kind of is like conventional medicine, but where I grew up in the South, you know, it's still very much not. So I think for people who I treat here in this area, you know, it just sort of depends on their mind and how they approach it. If I see certain stars that suggest that a more zany approach is going to bring the remedy, then I might say, hey, go ahead and have that surgery. And I'll be like, what? Yeah, and take that drug. What? So, you know, it can kind of like flip around, right? Sometimes the health palace can show whether it's going to be a chronic issue that just needs management. And that's so helpful as a healthcare provider to you know, be able to approach my patient and say, this is something we have to manage. Well, you know, I'm here to support you, but you're just gonna have to manage this. And we can talk about all the amazing resources that you have on how to manage it. Versus others, you know, I can look at the chart and say, okay, just, you know, wait till next year, it's gonna be fine. And then still other people, their health, you know, you read it differently. It might be a case of like I said before, you know, like there may be very strong stars in houses of the chart that haven't been attended to yet, you know. And so just being directed toward that's empowering, you know. I think the Taoist view, you know, Ming would giggle because there's not so much of an attachment to what we would think of and as a nice outcome. From where he sat, it was a much wider view. But of course that wasn't disconnected to people's actual real felt suffering, you know. And so Polestar isn't a morbid topic. It's not scary. Even the most difficult star, everybody has the same stars, right? Everybody has the same star. They're just rearranged differently in all of our charts. The most difficult, pernicious little bugger of a star is still nowhere near as strong as our stronger stars, of which we have, like, you know, 4 really strong stars, and then other ones that are less strong but still really strong. And then we have, you know, little annoying mosquito bite stars that come and bite us this year and not the next. No big deal. It's like, you know, you scratch the itch for a week and then it's gone. But even the most difficult stars. So it's quite a positive system. It's not doom and gloom. It's not morbid. And I think that's one reason that Ming used to giggle so darn much and could see it as a joke without being like, oh, ha ha ha, your cancer is such a great teacher, huh? You know, like that. No, you know, no one needs that. Like, you know, when we're suffering, we're really suffering, and we want to be understood, and we want to understand why, and we want to understand how to work with it. But Chinese Polestar can give us a way to feel ourselves as part of something bigger, because we are. The truth is that we are part of something bigger. It's not like a meme that just went around on Facebook or on Instagram. Like, we really are. It's not just a new agey trope. We really are part of something larger.
And on that note, several people have asked, is there a book you would recommend?
I wish. There's
Or
not.
Is there
There's not
someplace they could
yet.
go? Will you conduct classes on this in the
Yeah,
future?
I keep getting asked lately. In fact, my astrology buddy that I studied with at the same time, she was just asking me when she was in town. She's like, "So, are you gonna start teaching?" And maybe there are ways to learn. You can listen to Ming's teachings directly. At you can Google Liu Ming, Liu Ming, Ming, and you can listen to his teachings directly. And I'll just strongly caution to check with the other people who have been practicing for a long time to get the complete view. If you wanted to learn more about astrology other than listening to his lectures. But he spoke a lot about the resources that were available, including speaking to I'm blanking on the name of the guy who did the writings that are really, really old. Sorry, about Chinese astrology, and he had criticisms of that. And it really, he learned it directly from his teachers, and I learned it directly from him. This is not I'm really only qualified to speak about astrology in the way that I was trained directly by him. There's not a textbook to go to on this, and the ones that I've seen are embarrassing. And the websites that I've seen are a little scary too, because scary, I mean that in a literal way, because I have clients who come to me and they say, I Googled my chart and it said this and that and that and this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, let me unwind this. Like, it's okay. It's not that bad. So sorry. Not yet, but I also know some people are in the process of I've heard through the grapevine that some people are transcribing Ming's teachings. I'll probably start by I'm probably in the coming years going to start doing some meetings with people to do to look at case studies and look at how the chart integrates as a whole. So you can always like reach out to me about that. That's not the kind of thing that I'm really want to publicize, because I think everyone who studied with Ming is interested in holding that space open for as long as we can, just out of respect, and there are some people who are rushing in to fill that vacuum, and I think everyone wants to feel good about what emerges. So those of us who studied, we talk to each other. We'll all work together to make sure there's something good out there for you.
So, and I'll be unabashed here because I know I have a couple students on here. Should you guys want to reach out and work on case studies with Anne, that would fulfill your practicum hours. So, Dr. Crute, anyways. And then I have so think about that too. So, there's a personal question. You may take the choice to not answer that. Because I know the answer, but it is not my story to tell. Someone is asking your name of Shelton. Is that your maiden name, and are you from the South? Because they have a Shelton in their ancestry.
Oh, we're probably related. Yep, I'm from the South. It's actually my grandmother's maiden name in the very, very Southern tradition. I grew up Ann Shelton. Yeah, not even Ann Shelton. Really, what my name is. So,
and this is Lindsay Kalasa. I'll email you because I'm the one that asked about the Shelton surname. I do DNA-based genealogy work, so I'm curious.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's
for
great.
Been wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, please reach out, Ken.
We have about 10 minutes left because Anne is gracious with her time, and as you guys know, she's a little one that might want a little more mama time, so we don't want to take her all night. Does anybody have any other questions? Any other questions?
I'm loving the grins.
We have popped Anne's website in the chat. We've also popped her email in there. There's ways to get a hold of her. Everybody's loving seeing the little guy there. He's so cute. And yes, I did address it. Ann and I spoke, and we want to hold the recording until after the start of the real new year. And unfortunately, the next 2 weekends, we are not talking about world politics anymore, Omkar. Sorry. Omkar's like, can you talk about the world politics a little more? And I'm like, kind of feel like we should just, I think I would feel more comfortable if we just left that where that was at. But anyways, back to the recordings. Unfortunately, we have our big DAOM weekend this weekend, and then next weekend I have a big research symposium we are hosting. So I am not going to have an opportunity to do much editing until the 23rd. So I will get it to you guys on the 24th. I will send it to you through a program called WeTransfer. And all you do is it'll come to your email, and then you just have to download it from there, and then you can have your own copy. And Anne will also get a copy. She'll probably post it on her Facebook and all that kind of stuff as well. So any last minute questions? I mean, did you want to talk any more politics, Anne?
Do you have a specific question? Omkar, specific question? No specific question. Nothing's jumping out at me to say about it. Let me look at my notes to see if there's anything crazy. Well, I mean, the other thing that's happening is I know that I'm sort of impressed that we had a meeting between the Canadian, Mexican, and United States leadership this past week. That was something. And so I think that'll be really interesting, because that to me suggests actually something I think is auspicious, which is the United States is thinking about more than just itself as being the sole inhabitant of North America. So that bodes well. Canada's a fire rabbit, which is why they're so quiet on the world stage and yet ruthless. Just ask the indigenous people. And Mexico, I'm not even going to really guess at what Mexico is, because Mexican history is so complicated. I'm guessing they're a metal horse. I don't really know, because their history is so complicated. My 15-year-old had to write a paper about the Mexican Revolution, and oh my gosh. So I'm so glad that he's being taught that. I wasn't taught that sort of thing when I was a kid, which is, you know, another expression of the USA opening up its identity about being so Eurocentric in its orientation. So yay. But Mexican's leader is a water snake. So that's why I think we don't hear much from him, / it's not discussed in America because of the ways that America is still Eurocentric in its interests. So I think that's interesting. Does that satisfy, Omkar?
Thanks. Right. Any final questions? We have just a few minutes left.
A little more about Russia. There is a war. Well, by my reasoning, both Russia and Ukraine are both metal goats. So there's a really strong sense of national identity in both places. And pardon me, historically, the global view of those places has been that they're sort of one and the same, and they're not, by Ukraine's proclamation, but they are one and the same by Russia's proclamation. So it's dragon versus snake, and dragon versus, I mean, it's Zelensky's a snake in his own native element. He's a fire snake. Putin is a water dragon. So that's a water dragon is an enormous dragon. But you know, it's dragon energy is not favored in the rabbit year. So I wouldn't be expecting Putin to be well regarded by his people this year. In the past, you know, Putin was up to many, many shenanigans, and the Russian people were happy to just go along with it or look the other way, or, you know, just thank their lucky stars that things were sort of stable and that there was food and bread. There was bread and milk and clean water. It was like, yay, that's enough. But I think now the Russian people are a little bit like, I don't know, what did we just sign up for with this? This is a problem. So there's going to be a little bit more unrest, and the fact that Putin's a water dragon in this rabbit year, it's going to be harder for him to hold a good image. However, a water dragon is able to think in terms of really big time. So if they can hold out till the next dragon year, who knows? But I would say this year, Zelensky's got the edge. Again, I don't really like predictive astrology. We're not supposed to use astrology to game our lives. So huge caveat on anything that I just said.
Great job. All right. I am going to go ahead and call it. Again, we are, I need to call you Dr. Ann because I get to. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving our wisdom, sharing with us. Again, everybody, please, please, please take her email, take her website. I know Ann does she does post updates, things like that. Keep in contact. It's a great resource. And Ann, again, thank you so much for taking time out and spending it with us. We deeply appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see so many friends. Hello to all the people that I know your name. And it's so nice to meet new people. And I'm very honored to be here. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Robin.